Hey everyone. How are you today in Facebook Landia? I'm always curious how I can share this on other places, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. So we'll just get going for today. So today I want to talk to you about toxic energy, and I want to talk about specifically people who are highly sensitive, who are empathic, and just have really big open hearts, who feel a lot, and maybe who are going through a process of awakening, of enlightenment, of becoming conscious, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes when we're going through that process, when we're highly sensitive people, when we're empathic and compassionate people, being in the world can feel really overwhelming. It can feel toxic. It can feel as if we're going to drown, or it can feel sometimes like we're trapped. And I know from experience what this feels like, and I know what my particular tendencies are when I'm feeling that way, and that is to sort of shut down or to hide or to go into numbing practices. But here's the thing, here's what I also know. We're at a time and a place, and maybe we've always been at this time and place. I think generationally, every single generation has a tendency to sort of sound the alarm just as much as any other generation. And so maybe we're always at a time and a place, but we are at a time and a place where let's see, so there's some weird stuff going on. I hope the connection is okay. We're at a time and a place where it's necessary for us to show up. People who have big open hearts, who feel a lot, who feel connection with other people, who feel connection with the earth, who feel connection to source, universe, God, whatever you want to call it. We can't hide. We can't hide anymore. We can't shut down anymore. We can't numb anymore. It is imperative that we show up and that we're present. And so in order to do that without burning ourselves out, without sacrificing our health or our relationships or our sanity, we need certain tools in our toolkit. So I wanted to talk to you about a few of those tools. I have a webinar coming up. It's on Friday. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that at the end of the broadcast. And then I'll give you some more tools. In fact, actually, we'll go through a certain process that I use anyway to transform some of this toxic energy, some of this what feels overwhelming into a creative force, because that's ultimately what we want to be. We want to be creators. So I see that there's one person that's watching with me live, so thank you for joining me. And if you want to let me know who you are and where you are, that'd be fantastic. And if you're watching the replay later, I'd still love to know that you watched the replay. Let me know that you saw it, what you liked about it, what resonated with you, and that way I'll know what to bring more of. Okay. So this toxic energy, it feels poisonous. We can't just avoid it. The world needs us to engage. So let's talk first about what is toxic energy. We kind of throw this word around for whatever reason. I'm okay with using the word toxic energy, but some people call it negative energy. In my own practice, I work towards unifying yin and yang, positive and negative, good and bad, masculine and feminine, and the list goes on and on. And so I tend to shy away from the word negative and from any idea that we want to avoid negative things because they're part of the whole. So let's define toxic energy for right now. What I'm talking about is something that you may identify as negative energy, but let's get into it a little bit deeper. It's that energy that feels, if we take personal responsibility for it, it's that energy that feels it feels yucky, right? It feels overwhelming. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like too much. It feels toxic. It feels poisonous to us. And that's our perception of it, right? That's our experience of it. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about toxic energy. There are some people in the world who can argue with one another and they get really exhilarated by it and it feels really wonderful to them. They wouldn't call that toxic energy. I don't particularly care for discussion or argument that is of more a volatile nature. That to me feels uncomfortable, and that's my perception of it. So that's what I'm talking about. Anything that feels yucky to you, anything that feels poisonous to you, or that feels uncomfortable to you, anything, honestly, anything that does trigger a desire to shut down or to numb or to go into a place where you feel like you need comfort or you need soothing. And again, I want to just reiterate that that's our own personal reaction to it. And we can work with that. We can work with our reaction to those feelings and take the toxicity out of them. So certain energies do feel toxic to us, do feel poisonous to us. And a lot of that is due to, our stories around what certain energies mean. So we had some experiences in our childhood, we might call them trauma, wounds, something like that. We had some experiences in our childhood and those felt uncomfortable to us, and so we avoided them. And so that might be arguing, that might be name calling, that might be teasing, that might be any number of other things. So if you're watching this right now, welcome, and I'm glad you're here, and I'd love to know what feels toxic to you. And if you're watching the replay later, please let me know what feels toxic to you. If we are using this definition of what toxic energy is, and it's any energy that you feel uncomfortable around, that feels yucky to you, that feels poisonous to you. Is it arguing? Is it name calling? Is it teasing? Is it not being kind to people? What is it that feels toxic to you? That's really helpful to know. Okay, so one of the most basic things that you can do with toxic energy and being able to shift it and transform it, this is like the first step. This is the first thing that you want to do, is you want to actually stay present with it. You want to develop the tools and the skills and the practice to be able to be in that energy in such a way that you can feel safe enough to identify how it is that it makes you feel. Does it make you feel angry? Do you feel, let me rephrase that actually, because I want to always empower you. So it's not that the energy makes you feel a particular way, it is that you are responding to it in a certain way. So the toxic energy, identifying your feelings around it. Do you feel hurt? Do you feel sad? Do you feel angry? Do you feel uncomfortable? Whatever it is that you can do to begin to identify these feelings. So number one, we can identify the feelings by noticing how they feel in the body. Where is it in the body? How do you feel? What are the sensations in the body? What does it remind you of? Those are all ways that we can identify the way that we feel around toxic energy. Another way we can identify the way that we feel around toxic energy is we can start to cultivate our emotional language. And there's lots and lots of good resources, and I'll drop a few of those in the comments. But if you Google emotional language, you can come up with all kinds of graphs and charts and PDFs and things like that that will give you some more words for feelings, more feeling words, so that you can start to get into the nuance. Of course, we can always start with mad, sad, glad, and scared. That's sort of the four like main components of all of our feelings. There's disgust, of course, too. Brene Brown talks a lot about shame, so that might be in the mix as well. So when you feel this energy, where you notice that it feels poisonous to you, that you feel uncomfortable around it, notice what's going on in your body and see if you can find a word for it. See if you can find a feeling word for it or something close to it. And in just a moment, we're going to go to the third point, which is this formula that I have that's talking about how we can transform some of these energies. And one of those components is a strong imagination. One of the ways that we can develop a strong imagination is we can start to speak in Some people call it dream speak, or in symbols or in metaphors. And so if you can't quite get to the feeling, you can't quite land on a feeling word that completely describes what the sensations are in your body, feel free to make it more picturesque, use more imagery, strengthen your imagination by talking about this feeling that you have, with using metaphor, using symbols, using imagery, and that might be really helpful. So it takes about 90 seconds actually for our emotions, for our feelings to flow through the body when they're uninterrupted. And oftentimes when we are in situations where we feel toxic energy, we feel uncomfortable, we feel as if there's some kind of poison coming into our system, we resist. We resist either by shutting down, or we can go into fight or flight. But we resist allowing the sensations to flow through the body. Sometimes we get wrapped up in a loop, in a story loop, right, about what it means or what you need to do about it or how you need to fix it. And when any of those things happen, when we resist, when we shut down, when we numb, when we avoid, when we get into the story loop, then those feelings can't flow through the body, and it can start to feel more and more intense. But if we can stay present and stay curious with the feelings and the sensations in the body, then we can allow those feelings to move through the body and then dissipate, sort of like watching clouds in the sky. You know, a cloud comes up and then we notice it and then it shifts off into the distance. And so our feelings can be the same way. That's why a meditation practice can be really helpful with this particular, it's like practicing for the game. When you do the meditation practice and you know the thoughts and the feelings come up, and then you allow them to flow, when you're actually in the game and you feel the feelings more intensely and you think the thoughts more intensely, you've already got this practice underneath you to be able to let everything flow. Okay, so the third point that I want to talk to you about is this formula of a strong imagination plus a strong life force, or we could call it strong chi. Sometimes I call it a strong container. What I mean by that is your physical and energetic body being able to manage, to hold, to work with all of the energy that flows whenever you are in uncomfortable situations or challenging situations, toxic situations, poisonous situations, overwhelming situations. The strong container, the strong physical body, as strong as you can have your physical body, and the strong life force or chi will help you be able to feel the feels as big as they get without that sense of wanting to shut down or to numb. So strong imagination. One of the ways that I strengthen my imagination is I work with my dreams. I have other different things that I do to help me strengthen my imagination. I have creative practices that I do. Even when I am in a place where I'm praying or meditating or sending blessings or anything like that, I try to tap into that strong imagination and to visualize what it is that I, like with my senses, visualize what it is that I want to bring into the world. So there are lots of different ways that you can strengthen your imagination. And if there are ways that you strengthen your imagination, I would love to know what those are as well. For me, it's dream work and doing other creative practices. So dancing, drawing, writing, other things that help me with my creativity and with my imagination. The strong container part, for me, that is self-care. There's certain self-care practices that are non-negotiable for me. I need to move my body every single day. I need to eat in a certain way in order to feel strong in my body. It saps my life force when I don't move my body or when I eat in such a way that all of my energy is going toward managing whatever discomfort is in my body because of what I've eaten. And I'd rather put that energy towards something else. Now, that doesn't mean that I deprive myself. It doesn't mean that I'm very strict in my diet, but I do pay attention to how I feel when I eat. And I do tend to eat in such a way that I don't feel like my life force is going toward just managing what I've put into my body. I'd rather use my life force for something else. So self-care for me is very important. There are other things in my self-care that I do as well, but those are sort of two main components of it. Meditation, journaling, those sorts of things. And then for me, I also practice Qigong. So any kind of energy practice, Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, Reiki, journeying, meditation, any kind of practice that helps to get you in touch with your energy body, with this energy life force that you can't see but you can feel, so that you can learn how to harness that energy and work with that energy. So strong imagination plus strong life force, or container, strong chi, equals magic. Now, what do I mean by magic? I'm going to cover this more in the webinar that I'm going to be doing later on Friday, later in the week. But for me, magic is cooperation with the universe, with the laws of energy, with God, with karma, with whatever word you want to use for it, with source. And working with that formula, I know that I am a co-creator with source, with the universe. And if I'm a co-creator with source and with the universe, then it makes sense to me that I can easily transform any kind of toxic energy into a creative force. And for me, it's a creative force for love. So here's just a little tidbit of what I'm going to be talking about on Friday. And before I go into the details of of how you can catch that webinar and what we're going to be talking about, I want to just ask you a quick question. If you're watching the replay, I'd love for you to comment. What's one thing that you can do today to strengthen your imagination I love what's one thing you can do today to strengthen your container, to strengthen your life force? Just one thing. Like I said, I practice Tai Chi, I practice Qigong, and one of the principles that I work with as I teach is that when one thing moves, now we're talking about the body, but the great thing about Tai Chi and Qigong is that it's a metaphor. It strengthens my imagination as well. It's a metaphor for an internal experience. So it's a bodily metaphor for an internal experience. So one of the principles is when one thing moves, everything moves. And so as I'm even in stillness and I'm breathing, I notice that everything, if I'm very relaxed in my body and I'm allowing things to flow, everything moves. Everything in my body moves. It moves subtly. And also I can move in really big ways as well. And I can see how everything is connected. And then I can go internally and I can see how that applies to my life as well. So if we pick one thing today, what's one thing that we can move, one thing that we can do, one thing that we can take action on? And it can be a little thing, but what's that one thing that's going to cause everything else to ripple and move and shift as well? Please leave a comment and let me know what your one thing is. I'm a big fan of the one thing in many different respects. Okay, so the webinar that's coming up on Friday, it's coming up on Friday, June 14th, I think that's the date, at 11 a.m. Central Time, and I'm going to leave the link for the Facebook event page in the comments. And then if you want to join me, we will be on Zoom. So you'll need to register for Zoom if you've never been on Zoom before. It's an online classroom, and so you'll have to download a couple of things on your browser and kind of prepare for it beforehand. So registering beforehand is a good idea, just to make sure that you're there when we begin. There's going to be a lot of information in the class, and so I am going to start on time or very close to on time. And we're going to be talking about how to shift toxic energy into a creative force. We've called it shit shifting, because it is this alchemical process of taking this stuff that feels really icky and yucky, right, and shifting it into something that is useful, that's useful for us in our everyday life. We could call it composting if we wanted to as well. Thank you so much for joining me. If this resonates for you, I would love to know. And I'd also love for you to share this. These are things that I would love to get out into the world and share to a wider audience. So if any of this resonated with you and you can think of other people that would get something out of it too, please do share. Comments, likes, hearts, those are all very welcomed as well and appreciated. I'm Julie Balderrama. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you on Friday at the Shit Shifting webinar to transform toxic energy into a creative force. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.